Long before modern religions solidified their doctrines and the stars became objects of physics rather than myth, there existed an underground stream of spiritual knowledge, mysterious, forbidden, and dangerously subversive. That stream was Gnosticism, and at the heart of its cosmology lies a group of beings whose influence reaches far beyond the ancient world. They are known as the Archons, and according to the Gnostics they are not just minor spirits or angelic watchers. They are rulers, controllers, cosmic jailers. They are the very architects of the illusion we call reality. But who or what are the Archons? And why did the Gnostics, a mystical sect often persecuted by both Roman authorities and early Christian leaders, view these beings as such a profound existential threat? To understand the Archons, we must first unlearn everything we think we know about the structure of the universe. In mainstream Abrahamic religion, creation begins with God, a singular, omnipotent being who created the world and called it good. But for the Gnostics, the story is far more complex, and far darker. Gnostic cosmology begins with a realm beyond even God, a transcendent, unknowable source often called the monad. The monad is pure consciousness, infinite and ineffable, not a person, not a deity in the conventional sense, but the absolute origin of all things. From this monad emanates a cascade of divine beings known as the eons, eternal archetypes, each representing an aspect of divine intelligence, wisdom, truth, grace, light. Among these eons was one named Sophia, which means wisdom. Sophia, in her longing to know the monad more deeply, acted alone, outside the harmonious balance of the Aeonic realm. In doing so, she created something unintended, a malformed being, a demiurge, a false god. His name in many Gnostic texts is Yaldabaoth. And this is where the real story begins. Yaldabaoth was ignorant of the greater realms. He believed he was the only god, and in his arrogance he created the material world. Not as a divine act of love but as a prison, a counterfeit copy of the higher realms, a distortion. And from this demiurge came the Archons. The term Archon comes from the Greek word for ruler or authority. In the Gnostic worldview, the Archons are emanations or servants of Yaldabaoth, spiritual beings that govern the planets, manipulate matter and, most importantly, enslave the soul. They are often described as faceless, reptilian, machine-like, a hybrid between biological life and cold intelligence. In the Apocryphon of John, one of the core Gnostic texts, they are depicted as having strange forms: serpents, beasts, and otherworldly hybrids. They are blind creators, enforcing the illusion that the material world is all that exists. Sound familiar? Modern thinkers have often drawn parallels between the Archons and the concept of a simulation, a false reality projected onto the human mind. The Matrix in many ways is a Gnostic parable. We are living in a dream world, and the agents, the ones policing the boundaries of that illusion, are the Archons. But their deception doesn't stop at the material. The Archons specialize in distraction, confusion, and fear. They implant false thoughts, create systems of control, and manipulate the soul's journey back to the divine. According to the Gnostics, most institutional religion, politics, and even aspects of science are part of the archontic game, designed to keep humanity trapped in forgetfulness, unaware of its true origin. Because here's the Gnostic heresy, the dangerous idea they were persecuted for. You are not just a creature made by God. You are a spark of divinity, trapped in flesh but born of the stars. And the Archons? They don't want you to know that. So where do these beings exist? Are they physical, spiritual, psychological? The Gnostics would say, all of the above. The Archons operate on multiple levels. On the cosmic level, they are planetary rulers, associated with the 7 visible planets of classical antiquity. Each Archon governs one layer of the cosmos, forming a kind of spiritual blockade between Earth and the pleroma, the divine fullness where the eons dwell. On the psychic level, they feed on human fear, confusion, and chaos. They influence thoughts, promote violence and division, and pull souls into cycles of suffering. In this way, they are not unlike the concept of egregores or collective thought forms found in occult traditions, entities that exist because we empower them through unconscious repetition. And on the mythic level, they are the archetypes of oppression, the faceless rulers, the tyrants, the systems that feed on freedom. To the Gnostic, liberation from the Archons begins with gnosis, not knowledge in the academic sense but direct, inner revelation, an awakening, a memory of your origin. But the Archons aren't idle. They do not want humanity to awaken. According to texts like the Pistis Sophia, they war against the soul, creating obstacles, illusions, and even reincarnational traps to keep the spirit tethered to this realm. And that's where magic enters the picture. Many branches of Gnostic practice, especially those influenced by Hermeticism and early Egyptian mystery traditions, employed rituals, invocations, and meditations to bypass the archontic layers. Initiates were taught to recognize the Archons, call them by their names, and neutralize their power through divine authority. Each Archon had a planetary symbol, a vibration, and a spiritual password, and these were revealed in stages during initiation. These weren't games. They were psychic tools meant to free the soul from the labyrinth. But Gnosis isn't safe. It's not comfortable. To seek Gnosis is to wake up in a world that doesn't want you awake. And yet, people across the centuries, from the ancient Essenes to medieval alchemists to modern mystics, have continued to search, to remember, and to name the Archons. Because naming them is the first step to dethroning them. These entities are not only cosmic administrators, they are spiritual deceivers devoted to one goal, keeping the soul asleep. But who are the Archons specifically? Are they just mythological abstractions, or are they real entities that can still influence us today? And most importantly, can their power be resisted? To understand the depths of the archontic system, we must examine both their structure and their strategies. According to the Apocryphon of John, one of the most important Gnostic texts, there are 7 main Archons, each corresponding to one of the classical planets, and thus to one of the spheres in ancient cosmology. These Archons form a hierarchy beneath Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, and each one governs not only a layer of reality but a fundamental force of influence over the human psyche. Here they are, as recorded in the Gnostic texts, with their planetary associations. Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge himself, associated with Saturn. Io, associated with Jupiter. Sabaoth, associated with Mars. Adonaios, associated with the Sun. Eleos, associated with Venus. Astapheos, associated with Mercury. Hieros, associated with the Moon. Each of these names is not arbitrary. They echo ancient Semitic and Greek deity names, showing how the Gnostics repurposed existing religious symbols to tell a subversive story. Where the mainstream traditions saw gods or angels of order and power, the Gnostics saw jailers and thieves of light. These planetary Archons were said to stand guard over each level of the cosmos. In the ancient model, the soul descended through these planetary spheres before entering the material world, forgetting more of its divine origin at each step. Birth then was not a celebration, but an entrapment, a fall into illusion. And upon death, unless the soul had attained Gnosis, the spiritual knowledge of its divine origin, it would ascend and be challenged again by each Archon, who would demand a password or a spiritual counterforce. If the soul failed, it would be cast back into reincarnation, the cycle repeating endlessly. Each Archon doesn't just rule a planet, it rules an aspect of human consciousness. Saturn/Yaldabaoth represents control, limitation, and false law. Mars/Sabaoth is raw aggression and conflict. Venus/Eleos governs sensual temptation. Mercury/Astapheos manipulates thought and language. The Moon/Hieros governs emotion and the cycles of illusion. These weren't just celestial bodies. They were frequencies of bondage. The Gnostics believed that by knowing the names, symbols, and attributes of each Archon, the initiate could recognize their influence in the inner world and begin to fight back. But the Archons don't only work from above. They operate through systems here on Earth. According to this worldview, the Archons influence, or even control, many of the earthly institutions that shape human consciousness. This includes religion, yes, but also media, education, politics, and even entertainment. Anything that creates distraction, division, or submission can become an archontic tool. Have you ever wondered why global society seems obsessed with chaos, fear, and endless conflict? Why media often fills the mind with anxiety rather than peace? Why spiritual institutions sometimes seem more concerned with obedience than transformation? The Gnostics would say, that's not accidental. That's the Archons, operating through systems, keeping human souls in a dream of confusion. And yet, not all is hopeless. Because in the Gnostic worldview, every soul carries within it a spark of the divine pleroma, the realm of light beyond the Archon's reach. This spark is not erased by the material world, it is merely forgotten. And when that spark is awakened, the Archons lose their grip. This awakening is called gnosis. Not mere belief, not dogma, but a direct, living, burning knowledge of origin. A realization, I am not from here. I am not of this world. I am light trapped in matter, and I am meant to return. But gnosis doesn't come easily. It requires discipline, detachment, and above all, discernment. Because the Archons will not go quietly. They whisper false revelations. They masquerade as light. Some Gnostic texts even warn of counterfeit spirits, beings who appear as guides, but subtly lead souls deeper into illusion. So how did ancient Gnostics protect themselves? Through ritual, intention, and recognition. Gnostic sects often practiced forms of meditative ascent, where the initiate would symbolically rise through the planetary spheres in vision or trance, confronting each Archon. They would speak sacred names or invocations, passwords that granted safe passage. These were not spells in the Hollywood sense. They were acts of sovereignty, affirmations of inner light that neutralized false authority. Some even carried protective talismans, inscribed with the names of divine eons like Sophia, or with seals meant to blind or block archontic influence. But the ultimate protection wasn't external. It was remembrance. Because the Archons only have power over the soul that believes it is powerless. Their influence begins where our awareness ends. The more conscious you become of your inner thoughts, emotional patterns, and habitual behaviors, the more clearly you can see which ones do not belong to you. Gnosis, then, is a path of inner alchemy, turning confusion into clarity, fear into insight, slavery into liberation. Even today their influence may linger. It shows up in self-doubt, in compulsive comparison, in the belief that we are broken, separate, unloved. That voice in your head that says you'll never be enough? The Gnostics would say, that's not your voice. That's the echo of an Archon. And once you recognize it, truly see it, it begins to dissolve. In the modern world, this knowledge has returned in new forms. Jungian psychology, the study of archetypes, shadow work, even simulation theory, all echo the Gnostic impulse. To question appearances. To go deeper. To ask, what is real? And who benefits from this illusion? There are even modern mystics and spiritual teachers who draw on Gnostic themes, offering tools for spiritual sovereignty, grounding practices, intuitive development, conscious breathwork, and inner visualization, all meant to reconnect the soul to its original source. The war in truth is not out there. It's not against external beings or organizations. It is within, in the realm of attention, belief, and awareness. That is the battlefield. And every day we either surrender our energy to the Archons, or reclaim it through awakening. You were not made to be a prisoner of illusion. You were made to remember, to rise, to return. And maybe, just maybe, the Archons are not omnipotent jailers but fallen beings themselves. Lost in their own ignorance, feeding on fear because they've forgotten the source too. Some Gnostic traditions even hold out a strange kind of compassion for the Archons, not to excuse their oppression but to understand it, to transcend it. Because only when you see clearly can you walk freely. And that, perhaps, is the true revolution.